Hello, citizens of Gotham. My name is Graham Elwood, and you are watching the Political Vigilante. Thank you for watching our show. Thank you for being a smart, fun audience that wants to learn about stuff. And, thank you for hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button. Today, we're going to talk about we're going to meet the plutocrats that are buying up all the homes. We're going to get in. We've talked about that on this show. And it's important because it explains several things. One, why rents are so high, why home prices are so high, and they're artificially inflated. And we're going to see what they're doing and why they're doing it. But it's also a thing I want everyone to be educated on because we're not taught this. And the corporate media, is in bed with everybody, with Wall Street, and they let these companies do this. And I lost my home to foreclosure in 2010, and it's a pretty painful thing to deal with. So I forced myself to. I was like, I got to learn about this. I got blindsided. I made some mistakes, admittedly, but that's the thing in America. When you make mistakes, you are screwed. There's no one here to help you. You're on your own in America. And when the deck is stacked against the average American, and both political parties are bought and paid for, and the media is bought and paid for, and the courts are stacked in everyone's, in the ruling elite's favor. We have a system set up where if you have money, you can do whatever you want. There's two sets of rules. There's the laws for you and I, and then there's the laws for the ruling elites. And so I saw this article in Truthdig, I believe, Meet the Plutocrats, Buying Up the American Dream. The American dream is buying a home. That was the American dream. That was the American dream. That was what set America apart from so many other countries. Was you could get, in this country, if you worked hard, got a decent job and worked hard, you could buy a little home, and that home would appreciate a little bit in value. And, then as the home appreciated in value or as your family grew, you started to have kids, you'd sell that house and buy a bigger house. And then that was how you acquired wealth. And that became also intergenerational wealth. You left that home to your kids and so on and so forth. And that was the American dream. The American dream's gone. And this story is going to get into how and who and why. How America's wealthiest are systematically locking modest income families out of the housing market. This is in Truthdig, which is it's a great website to look at. Democracy or plutocracy? Which label fits today's US of A? An apt question to contemplate as we enter what could turn out to be our most harrowing political year since Abe Lincoln's election. In a democracy, people identify the problem they face and working together try to fashion solutions. In a plutocracy, by contrast, a society's richest employ their power to exploit the most pressing problems their nation faces and keep real solutions off the table. For younger American families, the classic American dream, a home of your own, has become an ongoing nightmare. Some 20% of young Americans, men between 25 and 34, lived with their parents last year. That is staggering. And it's not because, Gen Z or millennials are lazy. They can't afford homes. The rents in LA, I was looking for, I just got into this apartment back in September. I was looking around for a month and I was like, wow, the rents are out of control. 12% of young women. America's multi-generational household population, the Pew Research Center notes, has quadrupled since the early 70s. And it's not because people love living with their families. It's because it is not affordable. Fewer and fewer American young people can afford a home on their own. Overall, an Amherst Group analysis has found some 85% of renting households cannot qualify for a mortgage. America's most typical first-time home buyer last year, adds the National Association of Realtors, had already turned 36 years old. Young people a generation ago were becoming first-time home buyers in their 20s. The economic reality behind all those stats, the shrinking share of America's wealth that belongs to average Americans. Back in the mid-1990s, America's middle class, the middle 60% of U.S. households by income, held double the wealth of the nation's 1%. Last year, Federal Reserve researchers calculate top 1%ers held more wealth than our entire middle 6%. I want to break that down real quick. Let's just break that down real quick. In the 90s, 30 years ago, the middle class held more wealth than the 1%. And now the 1% hold more wealth than the entire population. So that is a statistic from the Federal Reserve, not some hippie bunch of lefties saying the middle class has been crushed, has been absolutely crushed and priced out of it. The average home price in America is about $400,000. In California, it's $800,000. So that means if you're in California, you want to buy an average home. That means to put a 20% down payment, you have to come up with $160,000 on an $800,000 home, which means you are then financing $640,000 at somewhere in the neighborhood of 7% interest. Again, if you're in the other parts of the country where the average home is $400,000, that's an $80,000 down payment you have to come up with. The average salary in America is about $50,000. So that's a year and a half of working, of just saving up. And again, you're financing $320,000 at 7%. That means you're going to have a mortgage somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,800 to $3,000 a month. Some rich people are busy turning the 20th century dream of owning a home into a grubby 21st century reality of renting your home forever. The rich and the corporations they run have spent years buying up homes for sale and turning their new purchases into rental properties. In big cities ranging from Atlanta to Phoenix, deep pocket investors have accounted for between a quarter and a third of local home purchases. The impact of this deep pocket dabbling in the sale of middle class housing: corporate landlords turn out to be more likely, a Vox analysis points out, to evict tenants, raise rents, and dodge needed repairs and maintenance. Oh, wow. How nice of them. Apologists for the richest among us are claiming that critics of this deep pocket interest in middle-class housing are making a mountain out of an investment molehill. They point out, for instance, that private equity firms and other institutional investors drove less than blah, 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 blah. I don't want to hear it. Private equity dollars can routinely buy up 50% of the houses on a single street. Other deep pocket movers and shakers are taking a different routes to exploiting America's inadequate supply of affordable housing. In the decade that ended in 2022, Realtor.com reported last March, the nation ended up with a shortfall of 6.5 million single-family homes. The investor response to that shortfall: an explosion of residential transition loans. These loans go to America's growing army of house flippers, local speculators of various sorts who buy up older homes from families that can't afford to make badly needed upgrades and repairs. The loans come at a relatively high interest rate, as much as 10% annually, notes Barron's. Financial industry outposts like iSharp Capital, a subsidiary of Blackstone, private equity Colossus, package these high interest notes into investment funds that offer millionaires returns that can average over 3% points more than investments in U.S. Treasury funds. Two lawmakers from the Pacific Northwest, Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon and Representative Adam Smith from Washington, have recently upped the reform ante. The End to Hedge Fund Control of America Homes Act they introduced this past December would, if enacted, ban hedge and private equity funds from buying up single-family homes and force them to sell off over the next decade the homes they already own, which would be huge, because that's the other thing what they're doing, these hedge funds, is they're buying up homes and renting them, or they're deliberately keeping some of them off of the market to drive up the rents. That's a thing that they're doing. Another bill proposed before Congress, the American Neighborhoods Protection Act, proposed by North Carolina lawmaker Jeff Jackson and Alma Adams, would require corporate owners of over 75 single-family homes to pay $10,000 per home annually into a housing trust fund individual families could tap for help on housing down payments. Oh, wow. None of these pending reforms have any shot of making it through the current Congress, not giving America's current plutocratic realities. America's richest don't just have the wherewithal to exploit the real needs of average American families. Their wealth distorts our national political dialogue. Their political power dooms and delays real solutions to the problems average people face. How can we advance these real solutions? We need to think big. We need to start redistributing the fabulous amounts of wealth that have concentrated America's economic summit. Without that redistribution, our wealthiest will continue to exploit our society's most aggravated, unmet needs. Take, for instance, the wheeling and dealing of one of the latest billionaire entrants to the Buy Up America housing stock sweepstakes, Jeff Bezos. Oh, that bald bag of shit. The investment fund startup Bezos is backing, Vice reported last month, is betting on single-family home rentals because fewer people can afford to buy homes and more people are stuck renting. What does Ro Khanna say? The last thing America needs is Bezos-backed investment company further consolidating single-family homes and putting homeownership out of reach for more and more people. Housing should be a right, not a speculative commodity. Oh, well, Ro Khanna, so good at lip service. This is a tough thing, guys. And I don't know what the fix is because, again, Congress will introduce bills, but Congress is bought and paid for by these big hedge funds that are in real estate. I mean, I've heard like Republican realtors, like card-carrying Republican realtors going, we got to get the hedge funds out of real estate. It's brutal. This is why, I mean, that's one of the ways I lost my home was, they bought my mortgage up. IndyMac Bank, One West Bank. My mortgage was with IndyMac Bank. So my home lost about 30% of its value when the 2008 crash hit. And, but One West Bank bought these mortgages up, mine being one of them, for 30 or 40 cents on the dollar. So then suddenly my home to them is not underwater. There's a profit. So they forced me out, which is what they did. They told me I was starting to fall behind on payments, and they said, we'll put you on a 3-month forbearance, which is they cut my payment in half. And they said, at the end of the 3 months, we'll restructure your loan. I said, oh, thank God. I started renting my home and I was like, oh, here we go. This will be fine. They'll restructure the loan. There was all the stimulus money from George Bush that had just come in September of 2008. I was like, about $700 billion. I said, oh, thank God. At the end of the 3 months, they said, oh, you don't qualify, Graham. And now you're 3 months behind on your mortgage. I was like, what? Obama gets sworn in January of 2009. He passes another $700-800 billion stimulus plan. They do the same thing. And me naively was like, well, Obama will be better than Bush. That's why I voted for Obama. He's so much better. And they did the same thing. We'll cut your mortgage payment in half for 3 months and restructure your loan. I said, thank God. At the end of the 3 months, they did the same thing. You don't qualify. Now you're 6 months behind. And they did it to me again. And then I got lawyers. And the lawyers told me to stop making mortgage payments because they go, when you get to foreclosure court, the judge, they want to keep people in their homes and they'll rule in your favor. Okay. And of course they didn't. It was a 16-month nightmare that ended with me losing my home, which was my retirement and my investment. I was lied to. I was manipulated, and they did this to millions of people. And then the banks got bailed out. They did this with taxpayer money. They took our tax dollars and gave it to the banks and just trusted that the banks were going to help us out. They would have given that money to all of us directly. My accountant at the time figured out the stimulus money, which is about $1.5 trillion. He figured out that if you gave it to every working aged adult, everyone between 18 to 65 that was working, and gave them that would have been $70,000 per person. What would people have done with that money? I would have thrown it at my house. I would have been out of debt, I would have been, boom, mortgage rates were low. I would have been fine. But instead they gave it to Wall Street, who took the money, screwed over people like me, stole my house, and then sold it and made a profit off of it, all using taxpayer dollars. This is why when I learned about Bitcoin, I became an advocate for Bitcoin. And I've become a Bitcoin maximalist, no two ways about it. This is why I don't trust both political parties. I do not trust the corporate media. I don't say it's fake news. That's a stupid thing that Trump says because he's a crybaby that just anytime they call him out, he says it's fake news. He's a little crybaby. He's a spoiled little crybaby with face tanner who's been on Epstein's plane 5 times. But this is they're paid, all of them, MSNBC, Fox, the big banks buy a lot of ad dollars. And so nobody got arrested. Obama didn't arrest anybody. Iceland put their bankers in jail. So it's one of the reasons I do this show. It's one of the reasons I own Bitcoin. My goal is to buy property using Bitcoin. Eat it. So those are the people that are screwing over our country, and those are the politicians that are going to give it lip service, but absolutely do not. Ro Khanna's going to, he won't do anything. He won't do anything. Ro Khanna's, he's all talk. He'll do nothing. He's useless. Why is that? Why do I know he's useless? He's a Democrat. The Democrats and Republicans are useless. They're bought and paid for. They're puppets. They have no purpose other than to say things in the press to try to keep their constituents voting for them. But ultimately, they're all bought and paid. I did a story about Ro Khanna's wife. She owns money and whatever. I think it was like defense industry. Just whatever. They're just all corrupt. They're all awful people. So this is why I vote third party. And this is why I own Bitcoin. And this is why I'll be in El Salvador. Like, share, subscribe, follow the money, connect the dots, get the truth, and shave your knuckles for justice.